How to master money before it masters you. The Stoic Wealth Mindset. Here is a question that will make most people uncomfortable. If you lost everything tonight, the accounts, the properties, the number that sits in your banking app and quietly defines how safe you feel, would you still know who you are tomorrow morning? Sit with that. Don't answer too fast. Because most people never ask this question until life asks it for them. A market collapses. A business fails. A single phone call rearranges everything. And in that moment, they discover the truth that no financial advisor will ever put in a pamphlet. Somewhere along the way, the money stopped being a tool. It became the foundation. And when a foundation cracks, everything built on top of it comes down with it. The strange part is, this isn't a poor man's problem. It is more often a rich man's disease. The wealthier a person becomes, the more elaborate the prison they build for themselves. Bigger obligations, bigger fears, bigger things to lose. Wealth does not automatically buy peace. In many cases, it rents out anxiety at a much higher price. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years before the term financial freedom existed. They lived among some of the richest men who ever breathed, emperors, senators, merchants of an empire that spanned the known world. And they watched, up close, what money did to the soul of a man who did not master it first. This is not a video telling you to reject wealth. It is not a lecture about the nobility of poverty. The Stoics were not ascetics who hated comfort. Some of them were staggeringly rich. This is something more precise and more useful. A way of relating to money so that it serves you instead of quietly, patiently becoming your master. Because there is a version of you that has money. And there is a version of you that money has. Today we find out which one you're building. Rome, the year 62 AD. Picture the Palatine Hill at dusk. Torches being lit along colonnades. The air thick with the smell of oil lamps, cedar smoke, and the distant tang of the Tiber. Inside one of the grandest private residences in the city lives a man who, by any measure of his era, has already won. His name is Lucius Annaeus Seneca, tutor and advisor to the Emperor Nero, author of philosophy that will outlive every stone in the city around him, and one of the richest private citizens in the entire Roman world. His fortune, by the accounts of his contemporaries, is almost unimaginable. Vast estates in the countryside, loans extended across the provinces, a household staff that numbers in the hundreds. He owns country villas with orchards and fish ponds. He owns tables of citron wood so rare that a single one could purchase a modest farm. And yet, this is the same man who spends his nights writing letters, the letters we still read today, warning his friend Lucilius about the corrosive danger of exactly this kind of life. There is a tension here that Seneca himself could feel pressing on his chest like a weight. His critics noticed it too. The historian Tacitus records that a political rival, Publius Suilius Rufus, publicly accused Seneca of hypocrisy. A philosopher who preached the rejection of luxury while quietly accumulating one of the largest fortunes in Rome. The accusation stung because it wasn't baseless. Seneca knew it wasn't baseless. He had written in his own letters about the danger of a soul weighed down by possessions. And yet his own ledger told a very different story. For years, this contradiction sat unresolved. Rome under Nero was shifting, becoming more volatile, more dangerous, more suspicious of anyone who held too much influence or too much wealth near the throne. Seneca had spent nearly a decade as Nero's advisor, guiding policy, shaping speeches, trying with diminishing success to temper the young emperor's worst instincts. But the emperor he once tutored was slipping further from his reach with every passing year. And the fortune Seneca had built alongside that closeness had become something else entirely. It had become a target. It had become a leash. According to Tacitus's account in the Annals, Seneca made a decision that almost no man in his position had ever made before. He went to Nero directly. And according to that same account, he did something remarkable. He offered to give it all back. Tacitus renders the substance of what Seneca said, not a verbatim transcript, but the historian's account of the moment as something like this: that he had received far more from Nero's generosity than any private citizen could reasonably need. That his gardens and estates had grown so vast they drew envy and suspicion rather than admiration. That a man in his position, so visibly enriched, so visibly close to power, had become a liability to the very emperor he served. He asked to be allowed to return the wealth, to step back from public life, and to spend what years remained to him in the quiet study of philosophy, the pursuit that had always mattered more to him than the gold. Nero's reply, as Tacitus records it, was warm on the surface. Praise for Seneca's restraint, a refusal to accept the offer, a suggestion that it would reflect poorly on the emperor's own generosity if his old tutor suddenly appeared to renounce it. But underneath the diplomatic language was something colder. The wealth stayed. The distance between the two men did not close. It widened. Seneca withdrew from public life as much as he was permitted to. He spent his final years in something closer to the philosophy he had always preached, even while the fortune remained technically his. And 3 years later, in 65 AD, following the discovery of a conspiracy against Nero, Seneca was ordered, on suspicion without a trial, to take his own life. Tacitus describes his final hours with a kind of grim, deliberate calm. Seneca comforting the friends and household gathered around him, dictating final thoughts, facing the end with the same composure he had spent a lifetime writing about. Whatever his contradictions in life, in his final hours the philosophy and the man finally became the same thing. The fortune he built, the fortune he once tried to hand back, did not save him. It had never been the thing that could. Here is what almost everyone misses about this story. Seneca's tragedy was not that he was wealthy. Stoicism has never demanded poverty as proof of virtue. Seneca himself wrote, plainly, that the wise man does not refuse the gifts of fortune. He simply does not depend on them. The tragedy is something more specific and far more relevant to your life right now. Wealth had become entangled with his identity, his safety, and his relationships to the point where he could no longer cleanly separate himself from it. By the time he tried to give it back, it was no longer just money. It was political leverage. It was a symbol other men had already assigned meaning to, whether he wanted that meaning or not. This is the psychological trap the Stoics called attachment to externals, anything outside your own judgment and character that you allow to become load-bearing for your sense of self. Money is the most common external of all, because unlike beauty or reputation, it feels controllable. It feels earned. It feels dangerously like it belongs entirely to you and reflects entirely on you. Modern psychology has a name for a piece of this same mechanism: hedonic adaptation. You get the raise. For a few weeks, life feels lighter. And then, almost invisibly, your baseline resets. The new number becomes normal. The anxiety that used to attach itself to the old number simply migrates to the new one. Researchers have watched this pattern for decades: lottery winners, executives, entire populations as national income rises, and the finding holds with uncomfortable consistency. Past a certain point of covered basic needs, more money buys very little additional peace. And it can quietly buy quite a lot of additional fear. Because now there is more to lose, more to defend, more eyes watching what you have. Epictetus, born into slavery and later freed, approached this from the opposite direction of Seneca's life, yet arrived at the identical warning. He taught that some things are within our control, our judgments, our choices, our responses, and some things are not, including wealth, reputation, and the opinions of others. Suffering, he argued, doesn't come from lacking things. It comes from mistaking what is not yours to control for something you can command. The moment you believe your net worth is who you are, you have handed a stranger, the market, an employer, fate itself, total authority over your peace of mind. This is the mechanism that trapped Seneca. Not the marble tables. Not the country estates themselves. It was the slow, almost undetectable process by which those things stopped being possessions he held loosely and became a structure he was standing on. When Nero's court began circling that fortune with suspicion, Seneca discovered, likely too late, that he had built his footing on something that was never fully his to keep. The Stoic reframe is simple to state and brutally difficult to live. Wealth is a preferred indifferent. Preferred because of course it is better to have resources, options, security for your family, freedom to choose your work. Indifferent because it does not determine your virtue, your character, or your worth as a human being. You are permitted to want more money. You are permitted to enjoy it fully when it comes. What you are not permitted, not if you want an unshakable mind, is to let your peace depend on its staying. This is the entire hidden architecture of Stoic wealth psychology. Not rejection. Not indifference in the lazy sense. A very precise, very deliberate loosening of the grip. So that whatever life hands you or takes away, you remain, underneath it, exactly who you were before. Step 1. Practice voluntary discomfort. Seneca himself recommended this practice to Lucilius in his letters, setting aside a period of days deliberately to eat the plainest food, wear the coarsest clothing, and ask yourself the question, is this the condition that I feared? The goal is not to punish yourself. It is reconnaissance. Most financial anxiety is built on an imagined version of poverty that you have never actually tested. So test it on your own terms while you still have a safety net. Pick one day this month. Eat simply. Turn off the comforts you consider essential, the subscriptions, the conveniences, the small daily luxuries. Sit with the discomfort and notice, you are still breathing. You are still capable. You are still fundamentally you. This single exercise, repeated periodically, quietly dismantles the fear that drives most bad financial decisions, the fear that without more you could not survive at all. Once you know from direct experience that you can survive with less, money stops being a shield against terror and starts being simply a tool you use with a clear head. Step 2. Conduct a nightly accounting, not of money but of judgment. Seneca also describes in his writing on anger a nightly practice of reviewing the day before sleep, not to count coins, but to examine his own conduct, asking where he acted well, where he failed, and what he might do differently. Adapt this directly to your relationship with money. Each night, ask yourself 3 questions. Did I make a financial decision today out of fear or out of clear judgment? Did I compare myself to someone else's fortune? And did that comparison serve me or simply wound me? Did I treat money today as a tool for a life I actually want, or as a scoreboard I am compulsively checking? Write the answers down, even briefly. Over weeks, this practice reveals the exact moments where money quietly took the driver's seat from your reasoning. The impulsive purchase after a stressful email. The resentment triggered by a colleague's new car. The hours lost refreshing a portfolio that would look identical whether you'd watched it or not. You cannot correct a pattern you cannot see. This nightly accounting turns invisible reflexes into visible choices. Step 3. Separate your identity from your number in writing. This is a practice drawn directly from the Stoic discipline of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity, applied specifically to wealth. Take 15 minutes and write 2 short descriptions of yourself. The first, who you are right now, including your character, your relationships, your skills, your daily habits, with your current financial position completely removed from the description. The second, imagine your income or savings cut by half, and write who you would still be under that condition. What you would still value, who would still love you, what work you could still do, what mornings would still look like. Most people discover, uncomfortably, that the second description barely changes at all. That discomfort is the point. It reveals how much of your sense of self was ever actually dependent on the number versus how much was simply borrowed anxiety you had never examined. Keep this piece of paper. Read it again whenever a bad month, a bad quarter, or a bad year makes you feel like you are dissolving. Step 4. Define enough before the world defines it for you. Perhaps the most dangerous financial state a person can live in is the absence of a defined finish line. Because without one, enough becomes whatever the next tier of wealth happens to be, forever, endlessly receding. The Stoics practiced deliberate reflection on what a sufficient life actually required, distinguishing clearly between necessity, comfort, and excess pursued only for status. Sit down on paper and define your own number. Not a fantasy figure pulled from comparison with strangers on the internet, but a genuinely considered figure that would cover your needs, your family's security, and a reasonable measure of the comforts you value. Write down what enough buys you, which specific fears it removes, which specific freedoms it grants. Then notice honestly how far you already are from zero. This exercise does not mean you stop building or striving. Stoicism never asked anyone to stop working toward a good life. It means you stop striving inside a fog with no visible shore and start striving toward a harbor you actually chose on your own terms before ambition or comparison chose it for you. Seneca spent a lifetime writing about the poison of attachment while quietly building the very fortune that would help seal his fate. He was not a hypocrite in the simple sense. He was something more human and more instructive. A brilliant mind who understood the danger perfectly in theory and still had to learn it the hard way in practice the way most of us do. That is the real lesson buried inside this story. Understanding Stoic philosophy is not the same as living it. You can know intellectually that your net worth is not your worth, and still check your portfolio 40 times a day like it's reporting your pulse. The gap between knowing and living is closed only through repetition, through the discomfort you choose on purpose, the nightly honesty, the paper where you define who you are without the number attached to your name. Money will come and money will go. Markets will rise and markets will correct without asking your permission. Careers will have good years and brutal ones. None of that is fully within your control, and the Stoics knew it 2,000 years before any of us inherited the wreckage of a bad quarter. What remains within your control every single day, regardless of the number in your account, is the quality of your judgment, the steadiness of your character, and your refusal to let something external decide how much peace you're allowed to have. Master that, and money becomes exactly what it was always meant to be. A tool in your hand, not a hand around your throat. If this way of thinking resonated with you, subscribe. There is a great deal more ancient wisdom waiting to be applied to the very modern problems you are carrying right now. The Stoics already solved most of what keeps you up at night. We are simply here to remember it together, one video at a time.